Hi guys, hope you're okay. Just wanted to get something out in the open. For those who watch my reviews on a weekly basis, I know that I usually post on a weekly basis. Please know that that is what I still intend to do. That being said, there was a lot of personal stuff going on in terms of last week. I don't really want to get into, but anyone who knows me personally, feel free to message me. But basically, please, for anyone who watches me on a weekly basis, please know and be assured that I still intend on making the same content as I always have done. I just had to take a break. I should have said something at the time, but I just didn't have the time. No pun intended there. Now then, time to review the second part of the Slitheen story, or the Slitheen two-parter. Now, to be brutally honest with you, I think I previously stated in my last video that I didn't really want to review this episode or this story in the two-parter format that it's on, for the simple reason being, excuse me, for the simple reason being that I like to review. Speaking obviously by purely personal preference, I tend to like reviewing things as an overall story arc rather. However, that being said, I genuinely don't know how short this review will be or how long it will be. All I do know is that I don't think I have as much information as I did in the last episode's review. Now, as I've been doing for the past few weeks, I try and get the background information out of the way. This is going to be a bit bizarre for me and quite contradictory on my part, because I have said for the past few weeks that I've tried to stay away from the political side of things. That being said, I feel that I wouldn't be doing this story justice if I completely ignored the parallels of the politics in the theme of this story. And rest assured, it was intentional to have certain parallels. And what I mean by that is with 2 points. The capitalist point, which I'm going to get to in a moment, but I think it's better to get the controversial box out of the way first. This is, and I don't really want to talk about it, but I'm just gonna make points of it. It's obvious that this story, and I did some background research to confirm my suspicions at the time of this episode's air date, that there was elements of this story that had a theme of the 2003 Iraq War. Yeah. And basically, it's not necessarily very asserted into the viewer's face, but with the story's use of massive weapon destruction, it was, I wouldn't say on the nose, but it was obvious that there was certain parallels to this than what the world was facing not long ago in real life. Now, I say that, in the way I've said that, I have attempted to try and say that in a very neutral tone. Because I genuinely believe that I think whatever you do, from, again, any writer's perspective, I saw a siren then, from any writer's perspective, when you write or tend to write fiction, and whatever story you're writing, if it has a tendency to have certain a theme that parallels real life, your theme parallels real life, it can either go either way, completely depending on your ability as a writer. It can be a little bit too on the nose for people, it can offend people even, but if your theme is just subtly to complement the story and acknowledge that it has been inspired by events in real life, then it can go really well. I can think of mutual stories on Doctor Alone, and also other things that was purposely out there to make the viewer question certain political and social issues rather. And I think any episode with me, any form of fiction that makes you question the social situations, the social issues in your own environment, in your own community, wherever you might be in, whichever community you might be in. I can only say that it will be a positive thing if it's making you question how you do things in your community, how you do things, how you behave around the people you are with, or around the people that are around you. Sorry, I'm getting I know I'm waffling, but basically the point I'm trying to make is that storytelling, in terms of having a theme of that parallels real life, can either be a good thing or a bad thing, completely depending on what kind of abilities you have personally as a writer. Another thing I wanted to mention as well is that I enjoyed this episode, and I think I've toyed with the concept in my other reviews, with the whole Russell T Davies being a political writer, and it starts to show, even dramatically so in this episode, and in terms of the ugliness of capitalism. Oh God, I hate this. I'm going to have to call this the controversial box. I hate talking politically. But this, I am not voicing my political opinion. I'm not going to tell anyone what my political opinion is. I am only stating facts from what I read, from doing background information. And that being said, I like how this episode, without getting sidetracked, I'm going to have to stop doing that. I apologise to the viewer. But I do like how this episode exposes the ugly side of capitalism. And what I mean by that is the idea of, and there is people out there in real life that I'm sure anyone can relate to, that we all know too well, that we are aware of people out there in our world, in real life, that are only too keen to harm someone else for their own personal or financial gain. Specifically, I'm aiming for financial gain on this one. And I feel that is the ugly side of what capitalism can be, and rest assured, capitalism in that aspect can be really ugly. And if you're ever wondering, well, what do I mean? How is this reflected on this particular episode of Doctor Who? The Slitheen was willing to blow an entire planet of people, murder an entire planet of people, just for purely financial gain. Now that's fiction. How many times have you heard of people in the news willing to hurt others for financial gain? You can see the resemblance, you can see the parallels. And to be brutally honest with you, I think it was extremely clever, because it wasn't too on the nose, but it was very subtle, but not too subtle to the point where the viewer didn't put two and two together. Again, the only thing I can say to that is compliment Russell T Davies. Now, I've got the background information out of the way, which, to be brutally honest with you, admittingly, I'm kind of glad, because I know I was in controversial waters there. If I'm looking down, it's because basically I've wrote certain notes, and I didn't want to look into the camera when talking about those things, because I'm very, without saying too much, the reason why I don't want to talk too politically is because the internet can be a very ugly thing when you may or may not accidentally say something, whether it be political or any social issue. So I try and avoid that if I can, because I don't, for the simple reason being, I would struggle to forgive myself if I ever said anything that would offend anyone that likes watching my reviews. So that's why I wasn't being ignorant, but I do have a tendency to look down when I'm aware of discussing certain controversial matters. But anyway, get that out of the way. What I would like to mention is, basically, what I would also like to point out is the pace. Throughout this entire episode, I noticed how pacey the music was, and how appropriate, for lack of a better word, or how much it complemented certain scenes. Like, one I have specifically in mind was the Doctor, Harriet Jones, and I'm going to call she is Billie Piper, Rose Tyler, when they all had a scene together and they were discussing the possibilities of how to combat the Slitheen when they was in Downing Street. And if anyone's watching these episodes with me as they simultaneously watch my reviews, I implore you to watch that, especially that scene again, and listen to the music, the pace here. That's not even, but basically the point I'm trying to make is the paciness of the music, I can't think. My vocabulary's just gone out the window today. But basically, the point I'm trying to make is how it complements the scene and how it gets the viewer more invested in certain scenes. And I think it does a great job of that throughout the entire episode. Another thing I noticed as well is that the second part of this story tends to focus a lot more on well, firstly on Harriet Jones's development. I think they did a great job in developing that character a lot more in the second part than they did in the first book part. However, the overall point I was trying to make is I feel it tended to have a theme of the human condition in terms of how I like to perceive it personally. The Slitheen two-parter is the first part tends to be more eventful, even though there are certain big events that does happen in the second part, which I'll get to in a minute. But I'm speaking specifically in terms of the human race is shocked by the possibility that there might be another alien race. Now, the second part, it seemed to be an underlying theme of consequence and how the human condition tends to not only comprehend, once you've comprehended a certain situation, how do you deal with that matter? What do? You move on, and it wasn't obvious, but I just felt there was an underlying theme of the human psyche in terms of relationships, and not just speaking or referencing specifically the terms of Harriet Jones and the Doctor and their dynamic with Rose Tyler, but there was also different storylines, like a sort of B plot going on with Mickey's dynamic with Jackie Tyler, which just so happens to I enjoyed those two scenes as well. I can't remember the actress who plays Jackie Tyler, but she's a very talented woman. But maybe it was just me, but they just seem to have genuine chemistry with each other. And from what I remember, I just feel it's quite a shame because they didn't seem to have that many scenes with each other. I think they might have done, I just genuinely can't remember. I put a little side note to you as well. Vinegar is lethal to the Slitheen. On a personal note, it's sort of funny because I can't stand vinegar either. But on a creative standpoint, I can only compliment it because I like the idea of, even though, for instance, speaking hypothetically, obviously, even though acid, which it actually is actually lethal to us, that wouldn't necessarily mean that they would be lethal to alien races. However, that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that vice versa. There might be substances that wouldn't harm us but might harm them. I like that concept. It gave them for me personally, strictly speaking on a personal basis, it added that dimension for me. The fact that, you know, there might be substances where people consume or perceive as an everyday thing might be deadly to an alien race. I like that. I think it's very, not only creative, but quite realistic, I would say. I nearly wrote a quotation for this episode, but the fact of the matter is, basically, the quotations were too short, great but short, but they were both funny and memorable. There was a lot of good quotations just to pick that one. But it's a shame in a way that this episode wasn't released at a later date because it was meme central, to be honest with you. There was a lot of great lines in this episode. Not that I can't remember a specific one, but there was some great lines, and and there was, what's the correct word to use? There was acted really well. Sorry, my vocabulary is gone tonight. My mind is a blank. So I do apologise if I seem a bit lethargic. Great visual effects in terms of the Slitheen being exploded. Now, I just, like I've previously stated, I tend to watch the episodes before I review them, and all I can say is, wow, I didn't realise how great that shot was in terms of the building, the explosion of the building. I remember it happening, but I don't necessarily remember it descriptively, visually rather. So I enjoyed that. That was quite a nice surprise for me. Let's talk about strictly in an in-character perspective. The Doctor's lack of interest in sticking around. Now, I know this is a continual theme even in today's Doctor Who, spoiler alert for those who don't know. But it's interesting to see, especially in Christopher Eccleston's portrayal of the Doctor, that the Doctor isn't overly keen by the idea of socialising with people after he's saved the day, and the fact that, you know, well, what if he just stayed and talked to these people that he's just saved, and he didn't like it. And it's quite interesting that a show such as this, to have the Doctor as the main character, he doesn't really have that much character development until the last scene in this particular, strictly speaking, in this particular episode. We don't really see that much character development on his side in this episode until the later scenes. Now, that's not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. It's just really interesting because there was so much going on. There was an A plot, there was a B plot, there was a C plot. And the fact that, without giving too much away, I don't think this is a spoiler saying this, but how the Doctor, even in subtle ways that the viewer might not have noticed watching for the first time round, how much the Doctor has evolved, has developed from the Doctor we're seeing now to how he's very jaded by the concept, or prospect rather, of socialising, having a meal with Jackie, having a meal with Rosie's family, to who we will eventually see with, one comes to mind, David Tennant's Doctor, who tends to like spending time with people, or if not doesn't mind. I don't want to use the word tolerate, because David Tennant's portrayal of the Doctor seems to be a lot more extroverted than Christopher Eccleston's Doctor. That's my perception anyway, and that's my interpretation. As always, we have already reached that part of the review. I like to give my thoughts on the episode, and I have put here: World War III proved to be a very satisfying conclusion to the Slitheen two-parter, with a more in-depth look into the human condition, having a theme of consequence as a follow-up to the last episode's eventful Aliens of London. With a very satisfying ending, I'm left to give World War III a 9 out of 10. I apologise if I've seemed a bit more lethargic than usual. I hope you're okay. I hope you are okay wherever you are, and as always, Dancing Bear out.